Alright, just touch one for me. That one right there?
Yeah. Someone show us too. Show us too. I want to see it.
I can't see it.
We got it. I'll show you. We're good.
Alright, so now I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to read all of you guys and figure out what your card is. Okay, so everyone needs a poker face, but I'm going to try to use everyone. So I need everyone.
This would be, yeah.
Might be, but might not.
It still is. Okay, go. Shut up.
Okay, so I'm going to go through the cards. Now, I don't want anyone to give anything away. That's important.
I don't mind.
Alright, we'll do Alright, everyone look, and just look for the card. Look for the card, but again, don't say anything, right? Let's see.
I think
it's okay.
We got it. Yeah, we got it.
Okay. None of those. Pal over here? Nick, did you shuffle kind of like this? You did it?
No, I did it more like...
No? Okay.
I don't think
So, it might be the way you shuffle. You guys are tough to read, but all I was able to do is narrow it down to 1 of 26.
Okay.
And if you remember what happened last time we did this, I have a backup plan. It's something called the unshuffle. So watch carefully. This is the move, okay? This is when it happens. The cards are mixed. You guys just shuffled them. That does it. And I know it doesn't look like much.
How did you do this?
And look, what it actually does is it unshuffles all of the red cards and all of the black cards, just like that. So weird. Now hold those in your hand, just like this, in a packet, like this. And what's your name again? Steph. Just like this. Hold on top.
Like
now,
touch it or just like
yeah, just keep covered so I can't get to it. Now, obviously, you want me to try to guess your cards, and I know it's 1 of 26. The only thing I know is it's not a black. It's a black card.
It is a black card?
Okay.
This is the magic trick. You might have to wait.
So I don't know the name of it, but just tell me what it is, and I'll do something amazing. Just tell me the name.
You want us to
I
tell
won't
you
touch
what
the
it is?
cards. Tell me what it is.
It's the 3 of spades.
3 of spades. Okay, watch.
Oh, no fucking way. It was in my hand.
Did you feel something?
It was here.
yo, that's so
No.
nuts, bro. What the hell?
Did you check it? There's all red ones.
Yeah, yo, I did. I swear.
You didn't even touch it.
And I saw 3 of spades
I
there.
saw it 3 of 2.
That's nuts, bro.
What
That's actually fucked. Bro, yo, feedback. This guy's legit.
What is good, guys? It is Reed and welcome back to another video. Today we got How to Make Your Magic Better, episode 14, Stop Overthinking. This is a really important video and I think something that a lot of magicians need to hear about overthinking, second guessing themselves and some of these things and how they're problems, what they can cause that's negative, are they ever positive, and how we can improve to get over this mindset. And so those are some of the things I'm going to talk about in this video and how getting over this mindset can actually really strengthen your magic. So I urge you to watch this video. These are some of the most important videos that I make on the channel. Reflect on some of the things I talk about and think about truly internally, do you have this problem or do you have some of the things that I talk about and how can you improve them, and just try to do your best to self-reflect and improve on these things, and it'll make all the world a difference for you. So as always, guys, if you like these videos, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel as well, helps me a lot. And if you want to check out some private lessons, you can at the link below. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into How to Make Your Magic Better, episode 14, Stop Overthinking. So what is it and what do I mean by stop overthinking? It's kind of a broad statement, and so I want to touch on what exactly I'm referring to. So one of the main issues with overthinking is overthinking an effect or a performance or whatever and thinking that you're going to fail. Too many people, and this isn't only magic, but in too many things in life, they spend too much time thinking about how something could go wrong and how they'll fail, and it prevents them from doing it, right? You end up doubting yourself, not believing that you're capable, not believing that you'll be able to pull it off, thinking it'll go wrong, and all these things are just negative thoughts that you shouldn't be having. When you get into this mindset, you often think about all of the things that go wrong and you start obsessing over all the different little things that are often irrational that could go wrong. A lot of people probably are familiar with this idea of, you know, your brain always jumping to the worst case scenario. And a lot of people deal with this, and it's something that I've dealt with before. When you hear a scenario or you think about how something might play out, your brain always jumps to the worst case. And that is a fairly common human trait that we have. And it's sort of like a defense mechanism, like a protective thing that we have, right? To try to protect ourselves a little bit, but it's always irrational, right? They're always irrational fears, things that never will play out that way. And they generally don't make a lot of sense. Another big area that people overthink too much is what people think of them. People are afraid of being judged. They're afraid of how their friends, their family, or even strangers that they don't know what they'll think of them. Oftentimes in failure, but sometimes even in success, right? When you're doing something that you like, but you think might come across a little bit weird or something like that. You're afraid how people will think of you after that. And then something that targets us magicians a little bit more importantly that I want to touch on is obsessing over methods, obsessing over the best methods, obsessing over the perfect effect, obsessing over these things that we overthink. We overthink what method we should use, why it's better, which one's better. We often end up in either a circle where we never get to our end goal, or we end up settling on something that is either not practical, too difficult, not actually as good as we think it is, right? So these are kind of what I mean by overthinking and what I want to touch on in this video. So why is this important? So the first part that I touched on about overthinking, you know, doing things and being afraid of failure, well, obviously they'll prevent you from performing, doing the thing that I'm assuming most of you love to do, which is show people magic and do magic, right? Even if you're not fully performing, but it'll hold you back from doing certain types of magic, performing, trying new things. And these are all things that I implore you to try on your magic journey, because they're great, and it'll make you a better magician, help you figure out what you like, what you don't like, come up with your style. These are all very important things. It holds you back not only creatively, but in your ability to perform and build sort of personal connections through that, or showcase your talents, hold back opportunities, could be business opportunities, could be personal opportunities, all kinds of things it'll hold back by you just overthinking that you're gonna fail, thinking about what could go wrong, thinking about what people will think of you. All these things will severely hold you back. It creates nerves. Actually, overthinking too much can actually facilitate nerves, actually create nerves that weren't gonna be there, right? If you're gonna go skydiving and you just went and did it and didn't think about it, you'd probably be a lot more fine than if you had a few days to think about everything that could go wrong, if the parachute doesn't deploy, all these things. And these nerves will now be way more heightened when you arrive because you've thought about all these things that could go wrong. So overthinking too much can actually create nerves, and sometimes like almost fictitious ones that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And like I kind of mentioned, it does prevent you from trying new things, which is so important in our everyday lives, but also in our magic. Now, this is very important as well when we talk about methods, because to determine what the best method for something is, you ultimately want to think about the effect, and more importantly, how the spectator will interpret the effect. So if you're stuck overthinking, you're stuck with magician's brain, which I'm going to talk about in another video if it hasn't already come out, a Dear Magicians video about having kind of magician's brain or thinking like a magician. But overthinking can put you in all of these boxes that won't let you see clearly, and oftentimes you'll either keep circling and doing circles and you'll just sputter without ever being able to make a decision, whether you're trying to create an effect or decide which effect you want to perform or which method you like. It'll often prevent you from getting to where you want to get to, and at the very least you'll waste a lot of time. In even worst case scenarios, you can end up overthinking something too much, at least in a specific avenue, right? You're thinking about how the spectator will view the method, and you get pigeonholed into that category, that when you then try out the method, you didn't think about the other things that that method is not really good at, right? Maybe it's not practical, maybe it's too difficult, too angle sensitive, because you were too focused on how the spectators would interpret the method that you didn't think about these other things, and now the method's just worse than another method you could have done. You know, being practical and easy are very important things to consider when you're performing as well. And sometimes overthinking can actually have you overlook the best method. Now, how do you stop overthinking? It can be a very difficult thing tied in with anxiety and all these other things that can be hard to overcome. The first thing that I always try to say is try to like ground yourself a bit in reality, like almost look at yourself from a third person perspective. Try to envision your situation from outside of your body without your personal biases, your personal beliefs, right? And think about bare bones, what is going on, right? So we're talking in the context of magic. So what is the effect? What are the possible methods? What do I want to achieve? How are actual real spectators, not my magician brain, how are spectators actually going to interpret this effect? What are the realistic problems that could go wrong? Not what are all the little tiny problems that I'm creating, what are the things that could actually go wrong? And when you have this outside perspective where you can focus on the reality of what's going on, it'll make your life a lot easier to actually dissect the trick, whether you're creating it or determining your performance or your pattern or whatever it is. Write down reminders too. If you really find yourself struggling with this, taking out your phone, opening your notes, and writing down notes about what is actually the case. What for a fact do I know is true? Then when you start to get these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts, you can glance at that and say, okay, no, there's no way the spectator is ever gonna do this and screw me up. Like, it's just not realistic, it's not gonna happen. Okay, it is possible that I could lose the card on my control. Okay, that is possible. So I have that written down. It's possible I could lose the card on the control. So now I think about, okay, this is a realistic problem, not an overthinking problem that's gonna create nerves and stress me out. This is a realistic problem. Now I can approach it from a grounded perspective and actually try to solve it. Okay, if I lose the card under control, no big deal. I'll just ask them what the card was, go through the deck, cull it, and we're back on track, right? So writing down the reminders to yourself of what's a real concern and what's not can be very important. And now that you have this, another really important thing that you can do, and something I always advocate for, right? Because you might be thinking, if you've heard me talk before, that I'm kind of contradicting myself because I've talked about always thinking about all the things that could go wrong and trying to think out your solutions for it, and then you won't have to worry, which is true. And that's another fantastic strategy for overcoming this overthinking, is if you have solutions to every problem. But the caveat there is that they need to be realistic problems, right? So once you've thought about things that can truly actually be a problem and actually go wrong in the real world, then addressing those problems can be a great solution. Thinking about how you would solve them if you got into this situation, and then you're prepared beforehand. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance? I think that's the quote. Anyway, something like that. Think about your audience, okay? These are real people who behave statistically like everyone else will, and you generally won't have many scenarios where someone is way out of whack and does something, one of these worries, these internal fears that you have about spectator ripping the cards out of your hand, or picking the top card that's your key card or whatever, ripping the gimmick out of your hand and spotting it. You have to think about your audience and understand and look at the statistics and just think rationally. Most people you interact with are going to be nice people. Most people are going to want to see it and cooperate, right? You will run into those heckler types once in a while. Just move on, but it is very rare, okay? Especially the type that will get handsy and grab your stuff. Grab your cards, not your stuff. But it is important, and to be able to think about your audience and think rationally about how they will behave. Some examples of overthinking. One that I remember is a trick called Guess Who. It's a propless name divination, and I think the first propless routine I ever really learned. It's by Peter Turner, and it essentially relies on spectators naming specific names within some parameter. And you're kind of just betting on the statistical probability. And I remember how much I overthought that routine and thought it would never work, and there's way too much factors that go into it. Like, they're never always going to say one of these 5 names when there's all these names out there to think of. And it wasn't until I started doing it that I realized, hey, this actually does work a large percentage of the time, say 80% of the time, to where I can actually confidently use this as a method. It was me overthinking it that prevented me from performing it for so long, because I was worried about the method and thinking it wouldn't work, and especially when you get it from a guy like Pete, it's like you hear him say it'll work, and then I'm just sitting there irrationally overthinking this, saying oh, no, this wouldn't work, it's never gonna work. But it does. Now I have the proof. I've done it a bunch of times and it works. And then with that effect, some of the problems that are real problems that I ended up thinking about, right? After I realized people not saying the names is probably an irrational fear, because Pete, a well-experienced guy, is telling me this statistically, it makes sense, all these things. There are other things okay, well, if they don't say the name, now you know, it's still a possibility. So how do I want to address it when it doesn't happen? But I'm not scared now that they'll never say the name, right? So it's now still worth me performing the effect. But another thing is, like, I realize, like, okay, people from different countries are obviously going to have different conventions, naming conventions, or names, or in their head. And so that presents a real problem. That's a real thing. So one solution is don't perform this effect to people from different countries. It's simple, you know, like, tons of other effects you can show different kinds of people. That's an example of like a real thing that could happen, and so it's a good option to have a solution. It's not a sensible thing, though, to be afraid that the effect isn't going to work just because I don't think it's going to work, right? Like, it's an irrational fear. Another effect is one that I recently performed, and I recently created too, in one of my recent street magic videos, where the spectators are kind of watching the magic happen to another guy with his eyes closed, and it's a really neat effect. I will be teaching it at some point, but there's one moment where you have to steal a card from a deck that's in a guy's hand with his eyes closed, right? So his eyes are closed and you just have to steal a card away. I thought for so long that I guarantee they'll feel it. Like, how would they not? Like, if they feel it, it kind of ruins the magical moment. But I realized, even in my testing, I'm like, okay, I feel this. My perspective is from someone trying to feel it. They wouldn't know what to feel. They got all kinds of other factors, you know, if we're on the street, they got people talking to them, they got the heat of the moment. That's a big thing, right? There's this pressure on them. And then there's one thing that I didn't even think about, which is like, the way the effect kind of plays out, you have everyone else kind of in on it with you, so they'll actually help convince that person that nothing happened. So you almost have a safety net. If they did feel something, they would ask those people, hey, did he touch me or something? And the brilliant thing is, they'll say no, because we're all trying to fool him together. And that's something I never would have discovered without having done the effect. And my fear of they're going to feel it, it's going to ruin the effect, was irrational, and I was just overthinking it too much. And once I did it, I realized how many other safety nets there were that weren't going to make this a worry of mine. So how to improve? Well, obviously practicing, getting better at your effects, and having more confidence in yourself will prevent the amount that you overthink things. Performing more, I mean, these are two things that I think are obvious. The more you perform, the more confidence you'll build. And performing new things, like, you know, I'm not saying to go try a brand new thing you just created for the first time at a gig, but testing it out on a friend or a family member where the stakes aren't high will not only, there'll be less nerves, so there'll be less things for you to overthink. Once you do it, you'll realize, like I did with that last effect I told you about, how many things were probably not realistic fears. And then I can address the ones that are legit. So performing these effects, going out and just doing it, things you're worried about, you'll see how many of your fears, you know, you have your 100 fears of things that could go wrong with the effect. You can knock down all, you know, down to like 3 things that are legit things that could happen. And then you address those, right? And then once those are addressed, you're planned, you're prepared, and then nothing can go wrong and there's no reason to overthink. Then using some of the reassurance techniques I've talked about, whether you need to write down things that are true so you can have that to physically read and see and sort of reassure yourself that, you know, whether you need to write down things like, you know, I've done this a bunch of times before, I'm a good performer, I've done, you know, I can handle crowds, I've dealt with hecklers, I've planned if they don't pick the card that I want them to, if I miss the force, this is what I'm going to do. If you write these things down, then just reading them over can really bring you some peace of mind. Then of course, start small. You know, if you need to test a new effect, like I mentioned, start on some audiences, your friends, family, where it's not as big of a deal. If you're just getting into performing and you're overthinking that and you're all nervous, start with surefire effects, self-working effects, perform for your friends and family. Take baby steps, and that can really help, you know, ease your mind, ease your nerves. And I think this is something that will enhance your magic so much if you can just get out of your own head, stop overthinking effects, stop overthinking methods. You know, when it comes to methods, thinking too hard about one aspect, try to think of the method from a broad perspective. Understand that audiences don't know anything about magic, so if you're going to do a force, all forces are kind of the same from an audience's perspective. They feel like they selected a card in some kind of fashion, yet you've been able to force it on them. And to them, they won't make that connection no matter what force you do. Yes, some feel a bit more free than others, but at the end of the day, the audiences, you have to understand how little they are familiar with the deck of cards and how much they're just trying to see magic and they're not really psychoanalyzing too much. that they won't really be thinking about, oh, this is a slightly less fair way of me selecting a playing card, right? That's not something that crosses their mind. So, overthinking things like that with a method that can pigeonhole you or steer you away from really good methods. Just try to think from the audience's perspective and really take a realistic third-party view of every situation and think about, if I didn't know any magic, how would I interpret this effect? And that will help you with your method. So guys, I hope you enjoyed How to Make Your Magic Better, episode 14. This was a great video, a lot of insight, and I hope that it can help you overcome some of your fears. If you have any fears and you need some help, feel free to drop me a comment, send me an email, and we can talk about it. If you need some more help and you really want to start performing and you're finding it difficult, you can sign up for a private lesson too, and I can help you with some of the effects that are great for starting to perform, where to perform, how to approach, all these important things we can cover. But yeah, I hope you guys liked this video. If you'd like more like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Subscribe goes a long way, like goes a long way. And it's free. The most cliche line ever, but it's free. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. Welcome to all the new subs. And with all that said, guys, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video.